Hi guys. Hi guys, welcome back to the Econ for our introductory session on a new series that I'll be starting off called Breaking Down Econ-Jargon. I feel like I owe you guys an explanation for going AWOL over the past week. I've been down with acute side effects after my first dose of the Pfizer vaccine, which required me being hospitalized for close to a week. I've started my road to recovery, and that entails 2 weeks of bed rest. But I wanted to stick to my word and get this introductory session up and running today. I'll keep this relatively short and just break down exactly how this series is going to work for you. So every Sunday, I will come on live and we will have an interactive live discussion on key economics definitions, things like demand, opportunity cost, aggregate demand, basic concepts that you will see in many econ-related articles, and also on the slides that I'll put up based on the different topics that we cover on our Instagram page. If you haven't checked out our Insta page yet, that is our main platform, so do check it out. It's called the Econ, and I post very real-life examples and give you case studies based on the subject and break down economic theories that are linked to that subject. So it's a great opportunity for you to engage with the subject if you're a potential economics student, or during dinner time conversations with your friends and family, to bring in economic theories into your arguments on real-life examples. So this series is going to be concurrent with all the slides that I put up and the topics that we cover on that page. Today's session will just brief you through the exact outline of how the 2 pages are going to work going forward. I will put up slides and topics during the week, and every Sunday evening I'll come on air and we will have an interactive Q&A session where we break down economics terms and definitions for you and help you understand those economics terms a lot better. Bear with me today. This is going to be relatively short as I continue my road to full recovery. But once I've fully recovered, we will have longer sessions and I will engage with you directly via Q&A sessions at the end of each session. And I'll also have special guests joining me so that we'll break these definitions down for you so that you're able to understand key econ-related jargon. Why is this important? I think many people, when they relate to the subject, think about these jargons straight away and distance themselves from the subject matter. But these are very simple terms if you break them down, and that is my main intention here on this show. The first definition that I want to cover in this series is a definition that I feel is quite important, and that is the definition of aggregate demand. You hear about politicians and economists coming up and saying it's important that country X or country Y stimulates demand, and that stimulating demand is one way of achieving economic growth. But what does demand necessarily entail? It is not individual demand. It is not the demand of person I or person Y. It is a collective demand by all consumers living in a country, right? Or the demand of each and every individual living in a certain country. So what does aggregate demand entail? And that's where the word aggregate comes in, because it is an accumulation of all individual demands in that particular country. So what does aggregate demand entail? So C stands for consumption, I stands for investment, G stands for government expenditure, X stands for exports, and M stands for imports. So X stands for export revenue and M stands for import expenditure. What does X minus M relate to? So X minus M in this equation is your net exports, and we'll get to that when I cover my next definition. But the main idea behind this definition is that aggregate demand entails 4 things, and that's consumption, your consumption expenditure, I, your investment expenditure, G being government expenditure, and your net exports. Consumption expenditure, under consumption expenditure is things that affect you as an individual. For example, your disposable income. Higher your disposable income, and we'll cover what disposable income is in our next episode next week. But disposable income, in short, is the income that is left over after you make all your tax payments and all your statutory payments are made. So higher your disposable income, there's a positive correlation between higher disposable income and higher consumption expenditure. If you take government expenditure, for example, you're looking at things like grants and subsidies being given by governments, and that entails government expenditure. Things like financing your healthcare system, those all come under government expenditure. So it's an accumulation of 4 or 5 factors that leads to changes in your aggregate demand. And other factors being constant, a growth in your aggregate demand could result in more economic growth. Under this same definition, I want to cover the term net exports. So net exports are exports minus imports. And quite intuitively, if you're relying more on your imports, and if your imports are higher than your exports, it has a negative effect on aggregate demand, on the formula we had earlier, which is why many countries that are import-led or import-led rather are looking to try and grow their export sector to ensure that that their exports become competitive across the board, along with other international markets, and become competitive internationally to the point where they can try and offset these negative net exports that most countries have, which is why you have a lot of emphasis on developing your export sector to ensure that you have a positive contribution from net exports to your overall aggregate demand formula. And the final definition I want to cover in this very short introductory session is opportunity cost. You'll hear this very, very often in economics. And why is that the case? In econ, we deal with scarcity, right? There's a scarcity of resources, and that is why you have the supply-demand problem. And that is why the basic economic problem is linked to scarcity. We don't have the resources to cater to everyone's interests and to cater to everyone's demands. So opportunity cost is fixated on this concept of scarcity because it is the value of the next best alternative that is sacrificed due to scarcity. And what do I mean by this? I'll give you a perfect example of opportunity cost, right? So, for example, let me break it down for you, right? If you have £5 to use for your consumption, right? You can either spend £4 from those £5 to get yourself a sandwich at Tesco, for example, for lunch, or you can save those £5 and get yourself a ticket to a football match for those £5. So let's assume you save up those £5 and get a very cheap ticket to a certain university football game, for example. Although I'm not too sure you get tickets for £5, but this is just in a hypothetical sense. If you save up and go and watch the football game for £5, the £4 that you could have spent on that particular sandwich at Tesco becomes your opportunity cost of choosing to go for the football game. It is the value, so the £4 is the value of the next best alternative, in this case being the sandwich at Tesco, that is sacrificed due to scarcity. Because you only have £5, there's scarcity in terms of the resources you have at hand. You can't spend £4 to go for a lunch at Tesco, for that sandwich at Tesco, and then head to watch your university football team play, because you only have £5 at hand. So that sandwich at Tesco becomes your next best alternative that is sacrificed to scarcity. And you see this a lot more as we move forward in the series. So I wanted to keep this relatively short, and I look forward to seeing you next Sunday as we cover more Econ-Jargon, and I get a few guests in so that we make this as interactive as possible. Thank you for bearing with me, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Cheers.